Hey y'all, my name is Carson and it's getting close to thru hiking season. So I'm going to go through my 30 tips for new thru hikers, specifically those who are hiking the AT, as that's the trail that I've done. All right, so my first tip is to train, is to go hiking, go backpacking, do whatever you can do. I mean, ideally, you can slot in like a multi-day trip to get more of a taste of what thru hiking is like. But if you can just do day hikes every day for a little while, that's great too. Training will not only help you be more physically prepared, but if anything, more importantly, more mentally prepared. You'll feel like you're ready to take on the task in front of you. My second tip is to do some of those hikes alone. So especially if you do have the time to do a backpacking trip or two and you're used to going with friends, try to do one alone, right? And get used to meeting strangers. You're not going to be alone on the AT, but what you are going to be is with a bunch of people that you haven't met yet. My third tip is to budget while you're on trail and to save up enough money beforehand. Thru hikes can be pretty expensive, and the more you're able to save up, the more likely you will be to succeed and succeed relatively comfortably. My fourth tip is to think about your whys. Why are you thru hiking? These are going to inform how you thru hike, and also if you can remember your whys, you're going to be a lot less likely to quit. Another tip is to reach out to previous thru hikers. So if you even vaguely know anyone who's thru hiked, reach out to them. Usually thru hikers love to yap about thru hiking, especially if it's to someone who's about to try it. And even if you don't know anyone, reach out to someone over social media. People are more than willing to help, and it'll give you some more information and answer all of those lingering questions that you have. My next tip is to test your gear. So this kind of goes with training. Hopefully during training you're testing your gear, but you do not want to get out there and find out that something that you have is not working for you, or you don't have something that you need. My seventh tip is to consider, especially if you don't have any previously, some kind of first aid training. It's highly unlikely that you'll have to use it, but if you do need it, it'll be invaluable. So consider looking into like a wilderness first aid course or something like that. My next tip is kind of personal opinion, but think about your start date, right? So on the AT, if you're going northbound like I did, a lot of folks, the prime season is kind of March through May, with probably April being the most busy. Personally, I was so glad that I started in late February so that I was a little bit ahead of the bubble. But it depends on the weather, it depends on the year, and it depends on what you want to get out of it. So think about what you want from your start and, how the weather and the bubble are going to affect that. My ninth tip is to not overplan, or at least recognize that if you do, most of it will go out the window. My 10th tip for the AT specifically is to resupply along the way. Some other trails, it's a little bit more up in the air, but on the AT, you can really get almost everything you need along the way. And that way you can avoid weird post office hours and mail situations. The caveat to this is if you maybe have some dietary restrictions that would limit you from this, but other than that, I think that most people can get what they need along the way. My next tip is to start slow. You'll hear this a lot, but if you start slow, you're going to be a lot more comfortable and a lot less likely to get injured, which leads into my next suggestion. My 12th suggestion is to be afraid of overuse injuries and the elements, but chill out on everything else. I think that people don't prioritize these and the things that they're worried about, but the most people I saw leave the trail were due to overuse injuries, going too far, too fast, and getting stress fractures. And then I say the elements because I know that the scariest encounters that I've had in the outdoors have simply been because of the weather and exposure. And I think that the weather presents a much larger risk than people actually give it credit for. So those are two things that I feel that people don't worry about very much while they're worrying about everything else. And in my experience, if I'm going to be worried about something, it would be those two things. Tip number 13 is to document your hike, primarily for yourself. This can be in a million different ways: journaling, videos, pictures, especially of the people that you're with. I wish that I had more pictures and videos from my hike. My next tip is to embrace the thru hiker community. You don't have to be a party animal. You don't have to be super social to be really involved and interactive with your fellow thru hikers. I'm not a big social person, but the most meaningful part of my hike by far was the people I met and was some of the lifelong friends that I made. My 15th tip is to eat lots of food. My 16th tip is to try to hike slower and take less breaks. Um, this isn't for anyone. This isn't for everyone, but I find that taking long breaks makes it harder to get going again. So I prefer to take less breaks throughout the day, but go relatively slow. And I feel that that helps with my endurance and my ability to get done more miles in the day. This bleeds into my next tip, which is consistency is king. So both on the daily scale, but also on the day-to-day scale, the more that you can kind of be consistent in your mileage, the better your body's gonna feel. I was guilty of doing a lot of big mile days and then begging for a zero to my tramily. And while that was at times fun, it wasn't really what my body wanted. Um, it's going to feel a lot easier if you can do two 15s versus if you're doing a 20 and then a 10 and then another 20, right? My next tip is to try not to get vortexed. I knew a group of people who got vortexed in New York City for a week. That's crazy and very expensive. Even in trail towns, if you're there for more than a like 1-0, it really adds up. So try to kind of stay on top of not getting vortexed. I loved zeros, but I really tried not to double or triple zero. My next tip is a really standard one. Hike your own hike. This is your hike. People are going to have a lot of opinions, but you have to think about, what on this hike is going to best suit you. What are the things that you're most excited about that bring you the most joy and fulfillment, and chase after those things. My next tip is to keep your expectations open, both of what's going to happen on the trail, right? What kind of experience you're going to have, and also what's going to happen after the trail. Don't expect for all of your problems to be solved by a thru hike. Sometimes it takes several years for some of the lessons that you were taught on your thru hike to actually kind of seep in. So go into this being open-minded about what you're going to get out of it, and you'll have a better time. Tip number 21 is to embrace your hiker life. What I mean by that is that we kind of get the chance to have a little bit of a refresh when we start thru hiking. No one knows you. You're often going by a different name, right? Your trail name. And you have this kind of freedom in not having the normal obligations of life. And so use that freedom to kind of explore who you are and who you want to be, to practice spontaneity, and to just seek joy. My next tip is to prioritize efficiency, whether that be in town or in camp. Being efficient will save you a lot of energy, which is a precious resource on a thru hike. It'll save you money in town, and it'll also save you time if you're worried about being able to complete your thru hike in time. One of the ways that I tried to be efficient was I always had a to-do list for town, and I followed that, and I got all my tasks done as soon as I could. My next tip, which is less of a tip and more of a requirement, is to follow Leave No Trace guidelines, right? This adventure that you're embarking on is amazing. You're going through these gorgeous areas, and we want to leave them pristine for everyone else. So do a quick Google, familiarize yourself with Leave No Trace principles, and make sure to follow them and encourage others to do the same. My next tip is to embrace the rain. It's the Appalachian Trail. It's going to rain a lot, and no amount of waterproof gear will keep you from that rain. What you can do is make sure that you line your pack so that your stuff doesn't get wet. And then this is personal preference, but most thru hikers opt for a hiking shoe that actually isn't waterproof so that it'll dry quicker, with the assumption being that any kind of shoe is going to get wet with enough rain. Same thing goes for rain jackets. I always went with Frog Togs. They're super cheap. They don't work super well, but also with the rain on the AT, no rain jacket works super well. Regardless, you will have to embrace the rain. My next tip is to protect your gear when it gets cold. So if you know it's going to be really cold, if you're starting out and it's cold, you got to sleep with your phone, your battery bank, and probably your water filter. If it's below freezing, you for sure need your water filter with you. Otherwise, that water will crack the filter when it expands, when it freezes. And then your phone battery and your battery bank, the batteries are going to be shot if you let them stay in the cold for too long. So just throw those in your sleeping bag and you're good to go. My next 3 pieces of advice have to do with the actual terrain on the AT. The first being, don't sweat the Smokies. People are going to fearmonger. It's your first kind of like big challenge on the trail if you're going northbound. But it's really not that bad. Usually folks get through it totally fine. My next word of wisdom is that Virginia is not flat, despite what you may hear. And then northern Pennsylvania and the whites are gonna suck, and you'll be ready for them regardless. similar to the Smokies, the whites in northern Pennsylvania are something that people fearmonger about a lot, rightfully so. But at that point, especially if you're northbound, you're ready, you've got it. My second to last tip is to savor your time on trail. So this looks different for everyone. For me, this meant towards the end of my thru hike, I intentionally slowed down in Maine because I wanted to enjoy it more. I wanted to really soak it in. And it's hard to be present for every single day, right? This is a multi-month adventure, but really do your best to be present and really savor this experience that you're able to have. And my final tip is that after your hike, you should try your best to stay connected to the trail community. Try to help out aspiring thru hikers. Try to do some trail magic for folks if you're in the area. It can be really fulfilling, and especially immediately after trail when you might be feeling in a slump, it's a great way to kind of revisit what the trail means to you, and to kind of pass it forward. So with that, those are my 30 tips for new thru hikers, especially folks who are thru hiking the AT. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm going to be posting a lot more videos, some about thru hiking. I'm going to thru hike the Pacific Crest Trail this year, but also a lot of other things. I post videos about caving, about running, things like that. So definitely subscribe if you want to see more. Thanks.